So here's a fascinating, maybe even a little provocative idea, that to really truly understand Korean history, you can't just look at Korea. You have to look at the entire world. Let's dive in and see what that actually means.
Okay, so let's kick things off with a real head-scratcher from history. We're talking about King Jang-suong of Goguryeo, one of Korea's most legendary kings. Now, this guy controlled a massive empire, stretching way up into Manchuria. So here's the puzzle. Why on earth would he basically turn his back on all that land and march his entire army south into the much smaller Korean peninsula? It just doesn't seem to make sense.
Now, if you open up a textbook, the answer seems pretty simple. He wanted the rich, fertile farmland around the Han River. Classic move, right? Secure the food supply. And yeah, that makes sense on the surface, but it always felt a little incomplete. I mean, was there really no good farmland in all of Manchuria? You know, the simple answer, it turns out, is almost never the whole story.
The real reason he made this huge move wasn't about local politics or just a simple land grab. No, the answer was unfolding thousands of miles away on a scale that was shaking up the entire Eurasian continent. His push south wasn't just a choice, it was a desperate reaction to a full-blown global crisis.
So check this out. In the 5th century, the whole world got colder. A kind of mini ice age set in, making life up on the northern steppes of Asia almost impossible. This climate shift forced nomadic groups to flee south, which threw northern China into total chaos. At the exact same time, half a world away, what was happening? Germanic tribes were also being pushed south by the cold, and their migration led directly to the fall of the Roman Empire. So when you see it like that, King Jang-suong wasn't just being aggressive, he was escaping the very same pressure from the north. His war, the chaos in China, and the fall of Rome, they're all chapters in the same giant climate-driven story. It's all connected.
So this just blows the whole thing wide open, right? If a major event from Korea's Three Kingdoms period was fundamentally tied to global climate change, what else are we missing? What other connections are hiding in plain sight? Well, let's go back even further. I mean, way back, to the very beginning, to the foundation myth of Korea itself.
Around 2200 BC, the world was slammed by a climate disaster that scientists now call the 4.2K event. And look, this was one of the most intense, disruptive climate shifts in all of human history. It wasn't a gentle, slow change. It was an abrupt, violent crisis that caused devastating droughts in some places and literally biblical floods in others.
And this wasn't just some local issue. We're talking about a worldwide catastrophe. The world's very first empire, the Akkadian Empire in Mesopotamia, just collapsed. Egypt's Old Kingdom, the guys who built the Great Pyramids, fell into complete chaos. The incredible cities of the Indus Valley civilization vanished off the map. And in China, this is the period of the legendary Great Flood that nearly wiped everyone out. The entire ancient world was in upheaval, and you could bet the Korean peninsula was feeling it too.
Okay, so with that global crisis in mind, let's look at Korea's founding myth, the story of Dangun, in a totally new light. In the story, a heavenly prince named Hwanung comes down to Earth. And who does he bring with him? The masters of wind, rain, and clouds. I mean, basically the cheat codes for agriculture. He represents a new group, a new people with advanced farming technology. And who does he find on Earth? A bear and a tiger. These animals aren't just animals, they represent the local hunter-gatherer tribes whose entire way of life was falling apart because of that climate crisis.
The story's big test, it all happens in a cave. The bear and the tiger are told they have to survive for 100 days on nothing but garlic and mugwort to become human. This is such a powerful metaphor for the agonizingly difficult switch from a life of hunting to a life of settled farming. The tiger, representing one of the local tribes, just can't handle it. They fail the test and are forced out. But the bear endures. The bear tribe successfully adapts, and they form an alliance, symbolized by a marriage, with the newcomers. And from their union, the first Korean nation, Gojoseon, is born. So you see, the myth isn't just some fairy tale. It's the collective memory of a massive societal transformation, one that was kicked off by a global event.
So, looking at history through this global, interconnected lens, it helps us crack the code of these ancient myths. But it also forces us to look at more recent, well-documented parts of history that can be, well, pretty uncomfortable.
Which brings us to a really tough question. What do you do with a period of history where a part of your country was ruled by a foreign power for over 400 years? Do you pretend it didn't happen? Do you deny it? Or do you try to understand what it meant? Let's do a quick compare and contrast. For about 400 years, Britain was a Roman province. Today, the British celebrate this history. They dig up Roman villas, they proudly display Roman artifacts in their biggest museums, and Hadrian's Wall is a national treasure. Now, for a similar amount of time, China's Han Dynasty ran a territory called the Leilong Commandery, right on the Korean peninsula. And yet, for centuries, its very existence inside Korea has been a source of intense debate, denial, and national shame.
Just let that number sink in for a second. 420 years. That is way longer than the United States has even existed as a country. This was not a short military raid. This was a deep, multi-generational reality that completely shaped the course of ancient Korean history.
For a long time, some historians argued that Leilong must have been located outside of Korea, somewhere in Manchuria. It was a way to keep the story of the peninsula pure. The debate was fierce, until archaeology dropped a bombshell. A literal smoking gun was discovered in a tomb right in the middle of modern-day Pyongyang.
So what was it? It was a small wooden slip, but it was everything. It was a detailed census report from the year 45 BC, and it laid it all out. 25 prefectures, almost 44,000 households, and a population of over 280,000 people. This was the proof. This wasn't some tiny military outpost. Leilong was a huge, well-organized, and populous province of the Han Empire, and it was right there in Pyongyang. Now, the legacy of Leilong is incredibly complicated. On the one hand, it was the main pipeline for advanced culture pouring into the peninsula. We're talking Chinese writing, laws, philosophy. In fact, the oldest copy of Confucius's Analects ever found in Korea was discovered in a Leilong tomb. It was a vibrant fusion society. But on the other hand, it was a major military and political power that served as a massive roadblock, preventing native kingdoms like Goguryeo from growing for hundreds of years.
So why has there been so much resistance to talking about this? Well, Professor Shim Jae-hoon of Dankook University, he doesn't pull any punches. He says this urge to erase the inconvenient parts of history comes from a self-defeating sense of insecurity. True historical confidence isn't about having a perfect, shiny past. It's about being strong enough to look at all of it, the good, the bad, and the complicated.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because when you stop looking at Leilong as a national stain and you start seeing it for what it actually was, a powerful, advanced civilization, the story of what happened next becomes so much more impressive.
Think about it. When Goguryeo finally conquered Leilong in 313 AD, it wasn't just some minor border dispute. This was the final act of a centuries-long struggle. They defeated the most technologically and culturally advanced power on the entire peninsula. By taking down that massive obstacle, Goguryeo victory finally cleared the stage for the great native kingdoms, Goguryeo, Baekje, and Silla, to truly rise and define an entire era. When you understand the size of the challenge, the achievement becomes that much greater.
And really, that's what this all boils down to, doesn't it? From global climate change shaping ancient myths to forgotten colonies defining the rise of great empires, history is never as simple or as isolated as we like to think it is. So the question is, what other amazing truths could we uncover if we were just brave enough to look at the whole, messy, complex, and interconnected picture?